All right, everybody, I'm Logan Allec. I'm a CPA, and this is my stimulus update for Wednesday, July 29th. If you could help me out and give me a thumbs up on this video below, I would really appreciate it, because that would help immensely with the YouTube algorithm, especially as we fight the stimulus clickbait out there. But have you all noticed that now that Republicans have released their bill, there's a lot less clickbait out there? Man, I mean, a couple months ago, it seemed that every other stimulus video you'd see on YouTube was clickbait on the $2,000 a month stimulus plans, right? As though that would actually be a serious consideration by Mitch McConnell's Senate. You remember, right? Videos like, sign up for $2,000 a month stimulus, retroactive $2,000 a month stimulus checks, just in $2,000 a month stimulus checks in talks in Congress. Thank God that's passed us. Anyway, the pulse on the negotiations right now between Democrats and Republicans is that it's not going well. We know that Schumer, Pelosi, Mnuchin, Meadows, they met yesterday. There are these bipartisan meetings going on between Democratic and Republican leaders regarding the stimulus legislation. And this morning, Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin told reporters that Republicans are very far apart from Democrats in the stimulus negotiations. Mnuchin was with Trump, and Trump had some things to say about the expiring federal eviction moratorium as well as stimulus checks. He said, you got to work on the evictions so people don't get evicted. You work on the payments to the people. The rest of it, we're so far apart, we don't care. I don't think he really means that he doesn't care about things other than direct payments to the people and the eviction moratorium, okay? But you know, one thing that we haven't heard a lot of squabbling over, quite frankly, between Democrats and Republicans is the stimulus checks. And that appears to be because Republicans and Democrats actually aren't too far apart from each other on stimulus checks, right? I mean, there are differences. Republicans want a CARES Act type round of stimulus checks, $1,200 per person with $500 per dependent, and now all dependents eligible. While Democrats in the HEROES Act proposed $1,200 per person and $1,200 per person per dependent, again, all dependents eligible, up to 3 dependents. And Democrats made the pool of individuals eligible for stimulus payments, you know, broader. They wanted to make it broader in the HEROES Act, right? But you know, at the end of the day, they both agree that there should be another round of $1,200 stimulus checks, okay? So whether or not stimulus checks are going to be in the next bill, that's not something to worry about at this point, right? There's no signs that we have to worry about that. I think it will be, right? Now what we have to be concerned about is getting the bill passed, right? All the things other than stimulus checks that Republicans and Democrats are arguing about, right? Because Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to go piecemeal on this, right? And if they did go piecemeal on anything, it probably wouldn't be stimulus checks. It would probably be unemployment, liability protection, school reopening, okay? So even though, right, we're probably not going to talk a whole lot about stimulus checks in particular going forward, at least as Republicans and Democrats negotiate, because there's nothing to really talk about because they seem to negotiate on those points. We have to look at what the other things in this bill are that could prevent a bill from passing at all. Okay? And one of those things is liability protection for businesses. And that's what I want to focus on today, because yesterday we talked about the other big sticking point between Republicans and Democrats, namely the unemployment. Right now I want to talk about the liability protection. But quick side note here on unemployment. In my home state of California, the LA Times is reporting that California lawmakers may consider doing their own $600 unemployment boost for California residents. I don't want to dwell on this because I know that many of you are not in California, but it's something to be aware of. Just like with stimulus checks here and there, you know, a few local governments have their own stimulus programs and whatnot. We may see something similar for unemployment. So keep an eye on your state and local news. I'll put a link to the LA Times article in the description below. Okay, but now on to liability protection. Because yesterday, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell reiterated his hard stance on liability protection for businesses in the next stimulus package. We know he has talked about this for months on end, and yesterday he repeated his claim that there will not be another stimulus bill without this provision in there. So while I know most of you are not business owners and this liability protection, it's not top of mind for you, I know that most of you do care about stimulus checks, and some of you care about unemployment, right? But this liability protection and the negotiations surrounding it is still important to pay attention to, because by McConnell's own admission, not including this liability protection in the final bipartisan legislation would be a deal breaker for him, for Mitch McConnell. And right now, top Democrats like Pelosi and Schumer aren't too happy with this liability shield. So the portion of the HEALS Act that deals with this liability protection is called the Safeguarding America's Frontline Employees to Offer Work Opportunities Required to Kickstart the Economy Act, or the Safe to Work Act. Because remember, this HEALS Act is really a conglomeration of separate bills. It's confusing, I know. Anyway, there's a lot in this part of the legislation, but the crux of McConnell's liability shield is this. If you're a small business, you shouldn't be sued for for coronavirus exposure. That's the language of the bill. Unless you were not making reasonable efforts in light of all the circumstances to comply with the applicable government standards and guidance in effect at the time of the alleged exposure to coronavirus, and you engaged in gross negligence or willful misconduct that caused an actual exposure to coronavirus that caused personal injury to somebody else. And they want this retroactive, right? This liability shield, the Republicans, or at least McConnell, wants it retroactive to December 1st, 2019, and lasting through at least September 30th, 2024, almost 5 years. And this protection could be longer if the Department of Health and Human Services says we're still in a coronavirus crisis after September 30th, 2024. Goodness, I sure hope not. Yesterday on MSNBC, Chuck Schumer called McConnell's proposed liability shield extreme to the nth and a K Street corporate lawyer wish list, of course referring to K Street in Washington, D.C., where a lot of political lobbyists have their office. Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, said on CBS Face the Nation that Democrats will not support liability protections for employers of essential workers in the next coronavirus relief bill. So this is definitely a battleground, folks. But remember, this all might be bargaining chips. Remember, there is no additional aid right now for state and local governments in the HEALS Act, the Republican proposal. We know Democrats want that. A couple months ago, Republicans were floating the idea of tying additional aid for state and local governments to this liability shield in that state, okay? And the document the New York Times got a hold of, in that document I showed you this past weekend, it appears that Republicans are acknowledging that they're going to have to give a little bit on state and local government to appease the Dems. And so state and local government funding and liability protection just very well might be key bargaining chips in these stimulus negotiations, especially that considering that McConnell is going to have to make a lot of bipartisan concessions here, right? Because so many of his own party, so many Republicans in the Senate don't want to do more stimulus, right? They don't think another relief bill is necessary because they're saying that we spent so much already. You heard Lindsey Graham, I played you the clip here on the channel. He said he thinks, half the Republicans are going to vote against any next stimulus package. So McConnell's going to have to work with the Dems here, okay, for something to pass, for stimulus checks to pass. All right, everybody, that is my stimulus update for now. I will publish at least another video later on today. Going to dig more into the HEALS Act, right? Maybe make a video on the whole FBI building drama. That's a very small part of the HEALS Act, but it's getting a lot of headlines, so I definitely want to address that. All right, thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.